If you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business. I learned this the hard way with my first company, so I created NetSuite, the world's #1 cloud business system. NetSuite gives you the visibility and control you need to make smart decisions and grow with confidence. That's why companies who use NetSuite grow 3 times faster than the S&P 500.
Schedule your free product tour right now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Digital Leaders Show, where we talk key issues and news at the intersection of business and technology in hopes of making you a better digital leader. We're live every Wednesday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific on LinkedIn and YouTube, and the audio recording is available on major podcast platforms the following week. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up IRPA AI. It's the Institute for Robotic Process Automation and Artificial Intelligence, as well as the Digital Enterprise Institute. We're a professional association, media, and peer-to-peer research network providing education, networking, and advice to over 130,000 members globally, all around automation, enterprise AI, and digital transformation. Thanks to our sponsor, Oracle NetSuite, their unified cloud business management solution helps organizations operate more effectively and provide real-time visibility into operational and financial performance. IRPA AI members and followers get preferred pricing of 40 to 45% off NetSuite. Just go to irpaai.com/NetSuite for more information. Today, we're discussing when AI hype becomes unethical, plus other tech business headlines for the week. My co-host today is Chris Surdak. He's a senior advisor to IRPA AI, an author, a consultant, former White House Chief Transformation Office Advisor, partner for digital transformation at Gartner, and automation AI practice lead at EY. Chris, good afternoon. Happy post-Thanksgiving.
Happy post-Thanksgiving. Hopefully you're over your tryptophan sleepiness and getting ready for the next holiday, right?
I didn't have it this year. I think it may have been the alcohol I drank while I was eating. It kind of helped me keep going. It was going.
Alcohol often trumps tryptophan. I'll give you that one.
There you go. There you go. How's your week been so far? Lots. I still can't keep up with all the AI news, but I think I've got a pretty good rundown for everybody today.
Yeah, and we're certainly reaching what I thought would have been a level of saturation quite a while ago, but we keep pushing the boundaries. People that complain we don't have enough content to train these AIs just need to keep having the AIs generate more content. We will be all set. Circular firing squad, sort of.
Yeah, every time I think that, things are kind of settling down, like you say, I see another player getting into this space. So this week, we had Amazon announce their ultra cluster AWS supercomputer composed of hundreds of thousands of its own titanium chips. They're working with NVIDIA. They're going to supply chips to Apple. And they're launching their own, what they call Nova family of generative AI models. So just when you thought maybe they were asleep, bang.
Well, and geez, back when I got my MBA almost 30 years ago, we talked about being a fast follower and how often that can be the more disruptive and more advantageous position to be in. So, and let's face it, Amazon has been remarkable, not only at being very successful inherently, but also in constantly recreating themselves. They are a transformation engine. Amazon Web Services is one of the most profitable businesses, one of their largest businesses. And when they first came out with that, we all said, why in the world are people using a bookstore to run their software? So I'm not all that surprised. I will say that as a writer, we always have this rule of threes. You want to say things with 3 words, and it kind of just has a rhythm to it. So when they say ultra cluster, I feel like they're leaving the 3rd word out, which we can all fill in as you see fit. But they're certainly going to make a splash. They're going to cause more hesitancy, maybe a little bit more, a combination of more FOMO, but also more of a potential pre-buyer's remorse, which we saw with RPA, which we saw with VDI, which we saw with big data, on and on and on. So the one thing you can count on from Amazon is to disrupt markets as they grow, and here we go.
And speaking of disruption, for all of the ISVs out there, the other big AWS announcement was what they're calling Amazon Q. which is going to allow ISVs to enhance their Gen AI experiences. So I guess thus far there's been sort of two categories to this. One is helping companies create their own AI products using this technology, and then creating their own AIs limited to their existing data. This announcement opens things up. So if you're a privacy person and you thought things were getting quieter, you got a whole new whole new thing to focus on. But this is promising to be able to retrieve data from multiple sources, not limited to an ISV's data, which aside from the privacy thing is really, really amazing stuff. I mean, you're talking about just if this thing hasn't been accelerated in the last year, I mean, I think this accelerates it tenfold. It also brings up, as a sales and marketing guy myself, this question of, how do you, as a company, how do you differentiate? It used to be that you had a product, a service, you had, differentiation or specialization over others. It makes me wonder, how do you differentiate when everybody's going to have access to these tools? Everyone's also now going to have access to the data.
Well, I've been talking about this for a decade. I've been writing about it even more with an emphasis the last 3 or 4 months, but it's the digital gray goo problem. If everybody's producing mountains of content that's all built on this average amplifier, which is what LLMs are, they amplify averageness. We're just producing more and more digital gray goo. And to your point, it makes it harder to stand out, but it also makes it more imperative that you do stand out because there's so much background noise. And as a result, even as we're trying to, this notion that AI is going to replace humans, no, it's going to make us even more dependent upon an ever smaller proportion of humans that have maximal humanness, because that's the only way you're going to be able to overcome this overwhelming amount of just this digital gray goo that's being produced by all these platforms.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, as we've talked about, this has democratized access to these things, but in another way, it's reignited the competition in a lot of ways, right? I mean, you take, we talked a few weeks ago about, Google's search business and some of the legalities and the regulatory issues, but just from a competitive standpoint, think about, what's happening to the advertising business. All these companies are fighting, for not only search really, but the ad revenue attached to search and really being your primary kind of operating system or starting point, when you search for things, when you look for things, when you're trying to get, answers. I had a social media person on here a while ago said, for certain generations, that's TikTok. Like, people actually start their search for answers on TikTok. Now you have these kind of agents, and I don't know if I can even create an exhaustive list, but off the top of my head, so you got ChatGPT, obviously, which, by the way, is launching a Chrome extension to go after Google, a Mac version to go after Apple. I think they've already had a Windows version. So you can do this stuff right from your search bar, right from your, I think the Google Chrome extension changes ChatGPT to their search GPT to your default search engine within Google Chrome. You have some of these operating system based apps. Gemini has been updated, now has access to actually what Google had access to the whole time, real time, information. You have some of these new guys, Perplexity. Meta has come out with their own. We talked about Amazon, obviously Microsoft Copilot. We talked about their announcement a couple weeks ago. And then you got Grok, the Twitter or X one. So, it's a battle for mind share or search share, if you will.
It's attentionomics, and we've been watching this attentionomics warfare for the better part of a quarter century, really ever since search started. I mean, my first search ever was on Yahoo, and Yahoo was dominant in the mid 1990s, and then Google took over everyone's eyeballs. So attentionomics, they became $1 trillion company. Facebook took over attentionomics, they become $1 trillion company. So I think the market motivation here is not necessarily that this stuff actually works. It's just the source of eyeball minutes, and you convert eyeball minutes into money. So in some ways, the extra competition is good, but again, I think it leads us down this digital gray goo problem where do you, if everyone's providing sort of similar stuff and it's all of equally mediocre output, how do you differentiate, and how do you get better results than that? I think generative AI is inherently, the physics, the mathematics of it is an averageness engine. Bernoulli's law of large numbers: the bigger the data set that we train off of, the more average the results necessarily must be. This isn't an opinion, it's math. And so unless we start combining this core technology of LLMs with other platforms that provide some degree of enhancement, and there's people working on this, things like knowledge graphs, I think we're going down a road where we're not going to be really thrilled with the ROI on these trillions of dollars we're putting in, beyond the increase in market cap of whoever sort of ends up dominating and takes over for, Meta for the social media era, let's say.
So we're going to talk, main topic today is AI ethics. So we're going to talk a little bit more about some advancements and some of those concerns in a moment. Before I do, though, this is not just an AI show. It's a digital leadership show. So we don't talk about anything besides AI, I think, the last 6 months. Yeah. But a couple other headlines that caught my eye, Chris. The FTC is finally banning some of these data brokers, cracking down on some of these data brokers. They announced settlements with the 2 big data brokers that are accused of selling sensitive information without consent. Gravy Analytics is one, and the other one's called Mobile Walla. Interesting that, I don't know about you, I've never heard of those names before. I know that there's data brokers out there. I know that this is a concern. We've covered it, but I don't even know that they've done such a good job of flying under the radar that I didn't even know the names until I read this article. But they're being ordered to delete all data from locations such as health clinics, religious sites. They're saying that they want to start treating them like credit bureaus or background check companies that prohibit them from selling sensitive information like social security numbers, location data. There's even an article in Wired, I think it was last week or the week before, that there's even government military assets that they found in their own analysis that they did in some of these data broker things overseas, which has location data for government military assets. Really, really kind of scary stuff. I wonder if this is just cracking the surface on this, or if this is really a move to change this behavior. But it's something.
I think it's remarkable that, as you say, you've never heard of these companies, but what's in their name? One of them uses the word gravy. The other uses the word wallet. They know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly what they're there to do. And while they may have faced some degree of penalties now, it probably took a good 10 years for the FTC to get around to penalizing them. They might have charged them 10, 20, $50 million. But meanwhile, over those 10 years, they're making $3, $5, $10 billion. And I made this argument in my second book. If you're a disruptor, you use the legal process and the regulatory process. If it costs me $1 million a week to fight that legal process, but I'm earning $10, $20 million a week while I do it, that's good business. And
this is the issue, right? We had the that expert, regulatory expert, on a few weeks ago. I mean, it's almost like, as you know, I'm not a big fan of overregulation, but this is an area where I think the legal system, the regulation community has to catch up, because this is not new. They've been doing this for, like you say, years and years and years. It was even a John Oliver show, I think, at some point, where they were able to acquire all this information on U.S. Congress people. That's the only reason why they were able to get any attention for this, is because they were gonna expose all this private information on members of Congress. But they're saying that the FTC is in the complaint is saying that these 2 companies gather more than 17 billion signals from about 1 billion smartphones every day.
Yep.
And that these companies, they're selling location data that's not anonymized, can be easily used to identify individuals, which has always been the thing that we've always said, hey, listen, who cares if your Amazon Alexa is recording you? It's anonymized. They're saying no, it's not. You can identify individuals here. And the order, if it holds up, is going to require them to erase or de-identify historic sensitive information, location information going back 3 years. So seems like a step in the right direction, but really, really kind of scary stuff.
It's a degree of a regulatory Pandora's box that we already opened. So I wrote about this as the privacy paradox. Yeah, we want to maintain our privacy, but I also want kick-ass coupons. Well, the kick-ass coupons come from knowing where I am at this moment and everything. So you can't have it both ways. And the degree to which we're inured, we're accustomed to that deep personalization experience, we're not going to let it go, or we're not going to let it go easily. Now, I can make you delete the last 3 years of data and promise you're not going to do it again. But then, and I've been studying this for a better part of a quarter of a century, every single privacy regulation or law that's been deployed around the world always has one caveat: unless you consent, right? I'm going to protect your data. We can't track you. We can't do any of this stuff unless you consent. Well, what's the very first thing you do with any app that you ever download? Click here to consent. And nobody reads the 75-page long end user license agreement. That's why it's 75 pages long.
But at least they're asking consent, although you're right, it's irrelevant. It's worthless. But what they're saying here is they didn't even consent. They basically decided, according to the complaint, they basically decided what you just said. Hey, we're making how many billions of dollars on this? So come and get us, slap us on the wrist, give us fines. It'll take you 10 years. It'll take you a bunch of legal fees to do it. And in the meantime, we'll rake it in. Right?
It's absolutely a step in the right direction. It's raising awareness. And it's that sort of escalating warfare that we see in cybersecurity, right? The attackers get more sophisticated, the defense has to get more sophisticated. The same is true in the privacy space in the legal and regulatory area. I think the more that we see that this is sort of a deal with the devil that we all made, and there's this thing we were saying like 10, 12 years ago, if you didn't pay for it, you're the product. Now you can see it firsthand. Yes, you're being sold. We keep track of everything you do. Every time I get in my car and I'm about to drive somewhere, I'm freaked out that my iPhone says it's going to take you 7 minutes to go where we already know you're going to go. Right. But that's just the experience that we now have. So it's good to at least demonstrate to people like Gravy and Wallet and their ilk that there is more oversight coming. It's going to make a little bit higher barrier for them to monetize all this stuff. But AI is going to take all of this and amp it up by at least an order of magnitude or two. So expect to see a lot more on this in the near future.
All right, so let's get to, I guess that's a good segue to ethics, right? So you sent me this article maybe a week or two back, and I'm going to kind of set it up for everybody, right? So the article was published in the New York Times. It was about a research study that came out basically saying that ChatGPT defeated doctors at diagnosing illnesses. So they said that the study found that ChatGPT outdid human physicians when assessing medical case histories, even when those doctors were using an AI a chatbot. So the OpenAI chatbot scored an average of 90% when diagnosing medical conditions from a case report and explaining its reasoning. Doctors that were randomly assigned to use the chatbot only got an average score of 76% accuracy, which is only 2% better than those who didn't use the chatbot at all, that did it completely the old-fashioned way on their own. So human 74%, human with AI assistance 76%, ChatGPT 90%. But you're saying those results are skewed. There's bias in there, yes?
I'm saying that this is a fraudulent article. Me and dozens, if not hundreds of other people who have looked into this are all largely in agreement that this is as unethical as it gets. And let me qualify that. So clearly this is back to attentionomics, right? This is super clickbaity. It's, oh my gosh, doctors are going to be put out of business too. It's not just, baristas and journalists, although this journalist should probably be on that short list as well. But it also kind of reveals the danger of this AI stuff like ChatGPT, where if you don't know enough about the question you're asking, you don't know if the answer you get is right or not. And that's really dangerous. In this instance, the devil's in the details. If you look at this study, which some of us bothered to actually do. And one of the things they say is those numbers you just mentioned are median numbers, not mean or average numbers. As someone who's done statistics for years and years and years, one of my favorite quotes from Mark Twain, there's lies, damn lies in statistics, is if someone's using median as the basis of what they're presenting and not mean, they're doing something probably nefarious. You oftentimes will use both of those things when you're trying to make a case for some research you've done. But if you're just using median and never mentioning mean, you're up to no good. And that's what happened here. The details of this case was they only talked to 50 doctors. So there were 50 doctors involved, and half of them were in their residency, half of them were kind of post-residency. This means they're brand new doctors, right? And where median comes up is the median of those 50 doctors was 3 years, not the mean, which is the average experience. The median is 3 years. That can mean that 25 of those doctors have a day of experience. The other 25 have 3 years and a day of experience, and the median would be 3 years. So it has nothing to, and the average of that, by the way, is like 1.5 years of experience. These are neophytes basically right out of med school. But the mere fact that it's presented that way kind of throws into doubt the entirety of the research. On top of that, I think it was six. They had 6 cases that were part of the study to see if they were being diagnosed. The AI in question was preloaded with the pre-canned, supposedly correct results of those 6 pre-canned cases. The doctors weren't given any of that. So from stem to stern, the entire study was really deeply, not only questionable, but really unethical. And it's great for clickbait. It got tons of attention. Yeah, I think my post about this probably got 40, 50,000 views or something. But this is the danger of these technologies and using this stuff and presenting it to audiences that don't have that, aren't going to have the level of expertise to go in and really look at it and see if this is true, or they're going to start acting based upon what something like this says. It's pretty troubling.
So I agree. I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but let me push back a little bit. I mean, this was not just a New York Times clickbait kind of article, right? This was published on the JAMA Network, which is a peer-reviewed open access medical journal, subsidiary of the American Medical Association. So this wasn't just some reporter who dug into some nonsense, right? So why is it? Why is this being? I mean, I would assume, maybe it's a bad assumption, I would assume that anything that it's published by the American Medical Association would not be anti-doctor and pro-technology.
You would assume that. There's kind of an old saying in the research field. There's remarkable consistency between the findings of research and the preferences of those who fund the research. so that might be part of it. I'd be tempted to go back to see who's paying these PhDs to do this research, and that might be pretty indicative of why they came up with the findings that they did. Also, there's just an urgency to not only get published if you're a researcher, but to get published big, to make a splash. And certainly this was splashy, both in terms of its initial supposed findings, but also in the backlash. So unfortunately, I forget who said this, but all publicity is good publicity. Shining a light on this may actually be good for them to a certain extent, but nonetheless, it does call. Your point is very valid. Why did JAMA let this get through and not catch this? That's a really good question that I think many of us should be asking, particularly in an age when we're all jumping on ChatGPT, asking it, what color is George Washington's white horse? And it says black.
Well,
I don't know that the white horse is white.
Yeah, what's scary about it though is I think I even said this on a show. I was reading something recently. It was a psychology thing, and the person and this was like a 20-year-old book, was basically saying, hey, be careful, because everything that you talk about attentionomics, everything that you Google, has a motivation, right? The first
Yes.
5 pages have a motivation. And so in all likelihood, the reputable research journal is probably on page 10 of the search results, and that's the legitimate one. You're saying that we can't trust that.
This is totally by design. I mean, we're all deeply compelled by a lot of the stuff that we see out there. That's not an accident. That's people are making a lot of money doing that. And it's funny, you're saying psychologists say this. It's like having a study where 90% of psychologists agree that 90% of their patients are crazy. Ever hear of selection bias? I mean, that's why they're coming to see you. So it's the need to be even more judicious in how we use our attention and what we do with our attention. Am I going to believe this or not? The stakes have never been higher, and it's going to get harder. Back to the digital gray goo. The higher the piles of digital gray goo get, the more imperative it's going to be that we step back a little bit and be critical and really think, does this pass the sniff test with me? And then look at the details, because the devil will be in those details. And if there's something kind of questionable, it should hopefully leap out pretty quickly.
So is your belief just that this is overhyped and we're not there yet, or you're saying that we'll never be there, that the AI will never, I guess never is an unfair word, but in the near future, not going to be at a place where the AI will actually be smarter than the doctors?
I don't think we yet understand what the word smarter means. It's a moving target, and we keep changing it. I think that this technology is like every other technology I've worked with in the last 30 years of being in IT. It's use case specific. And the other thing I firmly believe as an old rocket scientist is that the second law of thermodynamics governs nearly all of this, right? You do not get something for nothing. Every single project I ever implemented in my entire career supposedly had a positive ROI. That's not possible. Second law of thermodynamics says there's always a greater cost to doing something than the cost of doing nothing. It's entropy. The only time I firmly believe this, the only time you get a positive ROI out of a information technology is if you're buying into a growing market. If it lets you get a bigger proportion of the pie, either because the pie is getting bigger or you take a bigger slice. As long as you are investing the IT into building market share or market size, you can get a positive ROI. But if I'm just implementing a technology to like replace some workers with some tools, the ROI is never positive. And I'll die on that hill for the rest of my career.
All right, we got a topic for our next show. I like that. I want to unpack that when I have another 45 minutes. But okay, well, so before we move on to the other example of the question of ethics and AI, two things that I do think are relevant. Whether you believe this report or not, I think are interesting. One is when they were trying to explain why the doctors that had the help of the assistant only performed 2% better than the ones without the assistant. The rationale was that the doctors were not persuaded by the chatbot when it pointed out something that was at odds with their diagnoses. So, in other words, they tended to be wedded to their own idea of the correct diagnosis, which you could argue is a whole different type of bias that we have to address as technologists to say. And I was actually reading something last night. I got to find out. I'll put it in the show notes if I can find the exact page number and where it came from. But it was actually talking about, there's some built-in, qualities of our humanity that make us make our brains stick with things that we've become accustomed to believe, that we're convinced of, and less likely to think of new ideas and change what we've always established as true and those sorts of things. So that's interesting as we do more and more AI, like you say. Is it even helping us if we're going to second guess it and have to do all the work ourselves anyway? The other thing that I thought was interesting is that, and this one we've definitely talked about before. The other issue that they used to explain it was that many of the doctors didn't know how to use the chatbot to its fullest extent. So it gets to the training thing we've talked about a lot, right?
And both of those are true. I mean, gosh. it was almost a decade ago, three to 4 years prior to transformers and LLMs even being a white paper, that IBM's Watson was finding the exact same, this sort of, not egotistical is the wrong word, but this ego investment that doctors are going to have in their diagnoses. In 2013, 2014, IBM did this whole research study with their Watson on going through X-rays and mammographs to look for breast cancer. And back then, again, long before we had transformers, this was just machine learning. It was found that the technology back then wasn't better at coming up with the initial diagnosis. What it was phenomenal at was coming up with third, fourth, fifth possible diagnoses, which the doctor never would have thought of.
I remember that.
Okay, so we're kind of enhancing these same bias.
Because they weren't even used to those, because some of them were people that came from other countries, other regions, and they weren't the doctors weren't experienced in those regions, maybe.
Or it's just as soon as their mind locked into what they thought the diagnosis was, they're done. I mean, this is what made House such an amazing TV show and such a great series, right? Because he didn't take the first diagnosis. He kept digging down the rabbit hole. So he was basically just a big machine learning British guy trying to fake an American accent. But it was very, very effective. And so this bias amplification is inherent in all of these technologies. It's unavoidable. It is manageable. But this is why I always refer to particularly LLMs and transformers as bias amplifiers, because if machine learning 10 years ago made the bias slightly worse, this stuff makes it a million times worse. Think Google Gemini last summer, right? And so it's an operational reality, and it's so when I'm having all these AI governance discussion, and this is throughout my upcoming book that I co-authored on AI governance, you need to be aware that this bias amplification effect is there, and then you need to work to mitigate the damage that comes from it, or the harms. You can't stop it, but you need to have kind of the guardrails around it to make sure that it's under control when it happens.
So the other blatant example of the question over AI ethics is this article in Wired magazine saying, based on some research that they were reporting on, over 54% of longer English language posts on LinkedIn are generated by AI. It's based on an AI detection startup called Originality AI. So that's, I'm not a mathematician like you, but that's more than half, Chris. That means everything that you're reading online, was generated AI. So it really brings into question, all these things we're talking about, right? Creativity, authenticity, accuracy, and I think of LinkedIn, maybe it's because I do a lot of publishing and stuff like this, but, I think of LinkedIn as, aside from just a, networking platform, as an opportunity to kind of find experts in certain areas, demonstrate expertise in certain areas, right? We do this because we want executives who are, in the automation, AI, digital transformation space to have, free resources and access to us and find us, right? But if you're not the one creating it anymore, I mean, back to differentiation again, right? I mean, what, aside from, hey, is half the internet just made up? And I think about what you said too, about the race to mediocrity or the race to average, right? Where, all the content starts kind of looking the same, whether it's accurate or not. But, how do we, if we can't trust a medical journal and we can't trust what's being fed to us through a search, and now I go online and I find my experts that I trust on LinkedIn, and the stuff they're publishing isn't even original, isn't even theirs anymore. Now what, right?
I think untrust or detrust is going to be the survival skill of the future. And I'm just as guilty. I mean, a lot of what I post on LinkedIn is a repost to point out this sort of stuff. So in many ways, I'm contributing when I do that. But what I'm also trying to do is when I identify something that's most likely this sort of, it's average amplification, right? Someone auto-generated something to get clicks. Then someone like me comes along, like with this medical article, and say, hey, this is BS. Don't follow it. So to a degree, I'm adding to that averageness amplification. But I'm also and frankly, I think, as you well know, I take a lot of counterpoints on this stuff and kind of stick my fingers where they don't belong in many people's views. But by doing that, I'm hopefully contributing that nth percentile, that little percentile of humanness, of the expertise that people are looking for, to say, hey, wait a minute, something's not right here. And so we're going to need, now this is a great use case for people, and it seems like these guys are heading in this direction. If I can identify where all this stuff is the same, or it's copy, or it's digital gray goo, then I can start looking for what's left over, and the real gold is going to be in the leftovers. Right? When I dig a gold mine, 99% of the dirt coming out of the ground is worthless. I got to figure out how to throw that away and find that's all the tailings that I throw away, and then the gold is what I'm separating out to figure out. So people looking for a good use case with this stuff, there you go. How do I wade through the digital gray goo, which is greatly expanding and self-replicating, as we're seeing here, and then find that meaningful chunks of gold that are in there. Phenomenal use case for people that can figure it out.
But I just wonder about, and it's, there's so many different dimensions to this, right? There's a generational dimension to this. There's back to our search wars conversation at the top of the show. Yeah, you have that dimension of it. But if you get to a point where, okay, all these different companies are fighting to be your assistant, right? And they're feeding you information that's not expert content, and then you go to your so-called experts and their content isn't even original. At some point, are you losing access? I mean, I know you're a big fan of critical thinking, right? As I think everybody should be. Are we losing the ability to think critically? Are we trusting in some ways, I guess you go to the doctor and you're not feeling good and he diagnoses you and you trust him. And maybe we trust them too much. Maybe we should get multiple opinions. Maybe we should ask AI too. But our first point of contact has been to go to an expert. Maybe that's not perfect, but that's what's worked as a society for a long time. Now, if your first point of contact is a chatbot, then how do we validate all this? And then is it even benefiting us? Because to your point earlier, if you are either you're blindly following it, which is a problem, or you got to do your own research anyway, and then is it even valuable at that point?
I am biased, so I'll put that out there. Ever since when I was building spacecraft, I was the guy that figured out how do we not blow up on the way to Mars instead of how do we get there, and so that's colored my entire career. But I do think that the next generation of real expertise is going to be untrust, detrust, mistrust. And how do you figure out what to believe and what not to believe? And to your point, yeah, I wouldn't say we're breeding out critical thinking, but we're certainly de-emphasizing it. I saw something earlier today on LinkedIn, people talking about this, where children are becoming emotionally bonded and wedded to AIs. I see in my 6-year-old daughters in their imaginative play. This morning, I heard they were imaginatively playing that they were asking questions of Siri. I don't use Siri, but I know somewhere in their world, someone is using Siri to figure out how to interact with the world. So even in environments where I'm trying to keep my kids from that kind of stuff, it's still working its way in. So I do think that the future of expertise is this sort of mistrust, detrust, untrust, so that you have someone to go to make sure that what you're being fed is legit. And then if that's true, and all of the younger people are being trained and raised in this belief of these Google search results, and now what ChatGPT tells me, how do they build expertise to become that mistrusting expert in the future? Because it was never nucleated in their thought process.
Because like it or not, it's winning, right? The AI is winning. I mean, to say 54% of posts, I'm sure that number only goes up, not down. LinkedIn has been always kind of defensive about automation on their platform. They seem to be embracing this. I mean, they're doing some copyright checks and that kind of stuff, but for the most part, they're endorsing this, supporting this, and because it's the like you say, attention economy. It's more traffic for them. It's more content for the people that are publishing content, trying to monetize. Content Substack is also reporting that the top 10% of its newsletters have some AI generated or AI assisted content in it. So it's not just LinkedIn. And as the search wars, heat up, like we said before, it's all AI based.
Not to geek out, but I mean, again, for those with the expertise, and I've spent decades figuring this stuff out, it takes me back to Shannon's information theorem, which when I was getting into e-discovery and natural language processing, it took me 3 tries to understand that thing, but I eventually did. One of the concepts out of Shannon's information theorem is the less often something appears in a body of information, the more relevant it is to describing that body of information. So the extent to which the digital gray goo is taking over and all this auto-generated AI content seems to be overwhelming us, it actually will make it easier to discover true creativity, true expertise, true facts. But we need to be designing systems to apply Shannon's information theorem and similar concepts to eke out, again, the gold, separate the gold from the tailings. It's going to be more and more of a challenge as we produce bigger and bigger piles of blah. This digital verbal incontinence that we're producing at an industrialized scale. It's going to be harder, but the people that can figure that out, that's an amazing opportunity for them.
Great conversation, Chris. Thanks as always. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We're back on Wednesday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. And in the meantime, if there's anything you're working on, you want some free advice or just to learn some art of the possible from our team of subject matter experts like Chris, schedule a free networking call at irpaai.com/networking. Have a great week, everybody. Chris, stay out of trouble, buddy.
Yeah, maybe. See ya.